So the unseen extract on the social and political protest writing paper is a culmination of a pulling together of all of the skills that you've developed ever since you've been studying English literature through GCSE and A level. It's very similar to the Othello question in that you get an extract to which you have to respond, and you're exploring the significance of certain elements within that extract, just as you did with the Othello extract, only this time it's an extract which is unknown to you. So it's, this is the exam testing you. You're A-level literature students, you have a wide range of skills, critical reading skills, analysis skills. Let's see what you can do with something that you haven't seen before. The paper, this extract question, is only 3 hours long. There are 3 questions for you to answer, which obviously, it's easy to work out. You can have an hour, up to an hour on each question, which means really for the unseen, if I was sitting this exam, I would be setting myself aside at least 20 minutes to read the extract and to annotate and to plan it before I started to write it. So I've got plenty of time. I don't have to worry or be stressed or rush. I can be slow, I can be thorough, I can be methodical. And this presentation is to take you through and to remind you of how to best read and prepare this question before you start to write it. The exam board is very aware that you haven't seen this text before. So before you actually get the extract, they give you something called the preamble. It's a very brief overview of what it is that you are going to be reading, who wrote it, when they wrote it, briefly what the wider text is about. Because remember, they know you don't know anything about the rest of the extract, the rest of the text, and they're not expecting you to. So they're just giving you enough information to help you kind of navigate yourself, but it will also help you think about how to read the rest of the extract. So I would start with the preamble. I would have my highlighter ready. I would have my pen to make notes ready. And I would be thinking, okay, where is this extract from? Is it a poem and complete in itself? Is it something taken from the opening of a narrative of a novel or a play? Is it partway through? Is it very near the end? Because then it would show actually kind of the introduction of ideas or the culmination of ideas. I would obviously have a look for the date in which this piece was written or set, because there might be a difference there and I'd have to be kind of alert to that. You might get information about the text setting, which again might allow the writer to be exploring certain key ideas. I might get told some information about specific characters and the types of characters they are and what these characters might represent or symbolise, so I'll be looking out for that. I'll be obviously very mindful of my knowledge of the genre and the vocabulary associated with the genre, and can I link any of that vocabulary with any of the ideas presented in the preamble. And I might also get a little bit of information about narrative methods. So in reading this preamble and in annotating this preamble, it's almost preparing me to read the rest of the extract. It will be presenting me with some questions or some things that I think, well, that could be interesting. This might be explored in this extract. So I'm not reading the extract completely blind. I have some guidance, a steer to help me work my way through. So that's step 1. Before we move on to step 2, here's just a kind of a reminder of what the preamble will look like. You'll always have the question presented to you, and remember that word significance, what different meanings are emerging from this. And then I get told a certain amount of information. Manchester, so I've got a setting, a northern industrial town. I've got dates, published in 1848, and the novel is drawing upon a slightly wider time span of the 1830s to the 1840s. I'm told that this is a time of severe economic depression, and I know that these factory workers are going to be bearing the brunt of this, whilst the owners are going to be forcing them to work for not a huge amount of recompense for themselves, but in order to make money for them. So I've got a key conflict, a key kind of power struggle being presented, and I know that immediately from this preamble. It then tells me about how there has been a meeting, an unsuccessful meeting to resolve a dispute, and this extract, later that day, John Barton, a key character, is discussing the outcome of the meeting with the other workers. That leads me in beautifully to what I'm going to be reading in the extract. So you can see how helpful the preamble is. You absolutely shouldn't ignore it. And then I'm going to read the extract, and this is a really key piece of advice that Andy Haley, who's one of the chief examiners for AQA, gave us to pass on to you. When you're in the exam and your adrenaline's flowing, you kind of want to read quickly, you don't have time, you want to hurry up. And he says, actually, with the unseen, you need to stop, you need to breathe, and you need to read very slowly. Don't let your eyes skip ahead. and try and get a gist of what's happened. We're not asking for kind of a summary of the piece, we're asking for a detailed analysis. So read much more slowly than you normally would read if you were just reading it in your head. Almost imagine that you've got an audience in front of you and you are reading it to them. So you are careful over every single word. Do not rush the reading. So that's what I would do next. I would read, but I'll be mindful that although I'm panicking and I'm thinking that I've got to be careful of time, I'm going to read this slowly. I'm not going to let my eyes skip any section because I need to make sure I understand, well, I know that I've read every word. Once I've done this, I'm going to do a very similar thing to what I would do with the Othello extract question. I need to know what the mini narrative of the piece is. So what is the story of the moment that I've been presented by the exam board here? What is happening in it? And again, just like I've learnt from GCSE where I box up an extract, I would be doing exactly the same with this piece. What is, if it's a prose text, what is the purpose of every paragraph? What information am I getting as a reader there? How is the story building up? Is the focus exactly the same throughout the extract? Are they talking about the same concerns? Do they change? Do attitudes change? And by working methodically through paragraphs, if it's a prose text, or stanzas, if it's a poetry text, or if it's a drama and a piece of dialogue, through the different voices that I'm hearing in this extract, I should be able to get a sense of what ideas are being presented to me and how they're building up and how they culminate in the end of the piece. So after reading really slowly the extract and then pinning down the narrative of the extract, I am going to read it again, but this time I'm going to be reading thinking, okay, I know what the story is here, I know what the narrative is, I know what the big ideas are. How now is this writer presenting them to me? What different methods do they have at their disposal? And again, this is part of the exam question, so to ignore this and to not comment upon the how would mean I'd lose 50% of my marks. So I need to be really careful that I'm annotating for this as well. Just like with the Othello extract, I would have a different colour, I'd have my highlighters ready so I can highlight key moments, and I would have anything in authorial method in a different colour, so that again I can find it easily when I come to write up my answer, but I'm also mindful that I am answering all parts of the question. I'm not ignoring anything because my colours tell me that I've covered every single part of the question. So these are 5 key things that I would again be looking for, and I would almost try and memorise so that when I'm in the exam I know what to look for. Not all of this will be relevant because it depends upon the extract you've been given, but certainly I would imagine I would notice at least 3 of these things happening in any extract given. Lots of these are to do with the structural choices the writer is making. Firstly, the perspective of the piece, whose voice, whose viewpoint is the reader getting? Am I aligned to a certain character, or am I aligned to the narrator? Or can I see that the writer is making me think certain things about characters and who to trust and who not? Am I brought really close to the action? Am I amongst what's happening in this extract? Or am I kept at a little bit of a distance? I'd also be very mindful, and this ties in with point number 2, what perspective opens the extract and what closes the extract, what voice brings it to an end. Same at the start and the beginning or different? Is that because there are different ideas or different mindsets or different viewpoints being presented? So I'd be really mindful of who I'm hearing from and what range of different people I'm hearing from. As I've just mentioned, the opening and the closing moments of the extract are vital to comment upon, just as they are with the Othello section. The exam board have chosen this extract, this moment for you to talk about. And so, how it opens and how it closes have been very carefully chosen. There will be things of interest there. Make sure you notice them. I will also look for setting, another key kind of building block of any narrative. This might involve the time setting of the piece. It might also link in with the place, the location mentioned, or the locations mentioned, and what details I learn about these places. So I'll be looking for those absolutely. The 4th one is more specific to if I get a prose text, but if there are longer paragraphs in an extract because I've been given a piece from a novel, I would assume that they are more worthy of notice because it'll be an idea developing. So if I've got some very long paragraphs, and certainly ones that stand out in comparison to other paragraphs, I'd look really carefully at those, look at how they open and they close, how the idea is developing from that. I might look at patterns for language or semantic shifts so that I can see that certain maybe words or ideas are repeated. I'd also look to see whether these larger paragraphs connect with others and how perhaps there is a momentum to the ideas being presented. And finally, I might look for motifs, an image that seems to run throughout the text. So these are things I know I could look for, but I also need to be absolutely aware of form, as I've highlighted here, because the example I could give you an extract from a novel, from a drama, or from a piece of poetry. So that also could affect what I choose to comment upon. So this next slide, you actually might want to print off and have it in your file to help you revise. But I know that if I've got to be aware of the form of the piece, that if I've got a drama extract in front of me, I've got certain features that tell me that it's a drama that the author could be using in order to convey their ideas. In the middle section, if it's a novel, again, there are certain choices that a writer will be making that are specifically unique to a novel. And then finally, in the final column, if I'm a poet and I'm conveying my ideas, again, there are certain methods that I can be using that are fairly unique to the form of poetry. So again, I might be mindful of looking for these as well. So the previous slide and this slide are all things that will help me to annotate my text for dramatic method. So I've got my dramatic methods and I've got my narrative pinned down. I've done those different readings and I've got a sense of not just what's happening in the extract, but how it's happening, how it's being constructed. But I still need to spend some time doing a little bit more planning before I start writing. And this is something that I've created, which again could be really helpful for you to print off and have in your file and always have out when you're working. Because I've got my annotations, but then I need to think about, well, how do I pull this together to make a plan that's coherent and really clear to follow? In the top part of this slide, you have ideas to look for. And these are key concepts within the genre of political and social protest writing. I suspect that my 3 paragraphs, and that's what I'll be aiming for, 3 main paragraphs where I discuss this extract, I'll be tied into 3 of these ideas. I don't know which ones, because obviously I don't know what extract I'm going to be given. But once I've kind of done of my annotations, I'll be thinking, okay, well, which ones can I use? So for the extract that I was working on with Mary Barton, I'd certainly be looking at the power struggles that are being conveyed, because I've obviously got different classes involved. I've also got a challenge to power, so I'd probably have a look at rebellion and how that's presented and what happens to it. I could tie in with what I learn about issues of social class. I could feasibly, this is where I start to make some choices, start to think about human organisation and how the workplace is organised. But from that extract, even just from that preamble, I've got kind of key ideas. I know how the significance of this extract within the genre, because it's going to form within some of these ideas to look for. And each one of these will be my driving idea for a paragraph that I want to prove by then going to my extract and showing the moments. I've also included on this slide the dramatic methods that I've presented on the previous slide. It might be helpful to have them all in one place. And I've also just given a brief overview of how to structure your response. Again, you'll have lots of practice of this, but if you can kind of feel that there is a bit of a frame for this answer, then that's there for you to use. And finally, at the bottom of this slide are lots of words, lots of vocabulary, which are absolutely linked to the genre. And again, it might be that this is some of the language that you want to use as part of the ideas and part of your discussion of the paragraphs. But really, if you take nothing else from this slide, take the ideas to look for. Once I've annotated my extract, I need to plan what my 3 paragraphs are really going to be about. And I'm going to decide that by looking at my annotations and tying them in with which of the ideas to look for are the most dominant. So practice, you can absolutely nail this question, but you've just got to rehearse going through these procedures. The very best of luck.